and welcome to the people we've got here at BCS office in Moorgate and to uncounted thousands in the world of the web. So welcome to our event, which is jointly promoted by three groups of BCS. We've got the Business Change Group, SPA, which is Software Practice Advancement, also the West London branch. So welcome to people who are members of those groups, and anyone who's not, have a look on the BCS website and see what they can offer and follow their events. Yeah, the background to today's event is that I'm Steve Nellingham, Deputy Chair of the Business Change Group, and we felt the need to try and bring together the various strands of BCS through our monthly events. We've had talks previously from industry, very big industry, talking about their approach to business change. We have in the past had authors talking about publications they've done, people who specialise in assisting businesses on very particular themes, and we've had regular members who are talking about a thing that is of particular interest to them. So quite a wide variety of topics. And incidentally, if you have something yourself that you would like to present, please get in touch with the committee or of any of the three groups that I've mentioned to contributing to this, or indeed any others, because we're always on the lookout for new speakers. We've got a good list of very regular speakers who seize the opportunity to come time and time again, but new speakers will be more than welcome on any topic that you believe is linked to the nature of that group, and some of them they will interpret their own mandate very broadly. So have a look on that. So this really is our first venture for the Business Change Group anyway, of looking to training and education. And the BCS has got, as you may know on the website, professional certifications, pages and pages of qualifications and certifications under the heading certifications for professionals. And the thing that's of particular interest to me is that under Business Analysis, the Business Analysis Foundation, there is a course and an exam called Business Change, which is exactly the same name as we have in our group, which ties us into business analysis in the wider sense. So if you look on there, you'll find syllabuses, reading lists, sample questions, everything you need to know. And you can link also through to accredited training providers. So loads of stuff on there. So today's talk is going to be delivered by Sean Rafter, who is head of curriculum. What is I can't even read my writing here. He will no doubt explain. But some curriculum data and business analysis at one of those accredited training providers. So he's going to be talking about his own association with training from his own particular point of view within his organisation, but it will undoubtedly apply in the somewhat wider sense. So he's going to be exploring the ways that BCS certifications can support us and others in their careers, people that we work for, the people that we work with, the organisations that we advise. No, I think that's all I've got down here. So, Sean, he will be introducing himself. Tell us a bit about him and his.
Could you dismiss those dialogues? I just record you all that stuff.
Sorry,
It's done.
Oh. Yeah. So, I'm trusting that my colleague can switch between me and Sean. I'd like to welcome Sean to our event. He will introduce himself and head on talking about his own work in training and in delivering BCS courses. And if you have questions, then you put those into the chat, please. We can come to those at the end. And just as a sort of rule of engagement, perhaps for today, we're not here to criticise or comment specific on the BCS syllabus. Our starting point is that we're talking about the BCS syllabus exists, it can be examined, and it can be studied. But perhaps if there's interest later on for another session, we might get someone along to talk about the syllabus, and we can then challenge perhaps about that. But that's not really the purpose of today. We're looking really at the delivering and handling of training for ourselves and for the people that we work with. So, Sean.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And thank you very much for the invite for today. Super proud to be talking to you today. And I'm going to take you through, like Stephen says, kind of my perspective from a business analysis point of view. But before I do that, I suppose it'd probably be remiss of me not to kind of inform you a little bit about who I am. So obviously I'm Sean Rafter, Head of Curriculum for Data, Business Analysis with a side hustle in Artificial Intelligence. I work for Firebrand Training, but before that, I went to university. I studied chemistry and very quickly found out that doing the repeated same chemical test was not something that would get me out of bed particularly effectively. So after I finished university, I decided I'd have to go into the world of work and to start to earn some money. And that led me to what turned out to be a global multinational called CHEP. And CHEP basically supplies pallets, and effectively pretty much everything we buy in the UK at some stage is on a pallet somewhere. Depending on where you shop, you might actually see those pallets within supermarkets or IKEA or somewhere like that. And I was a bit young and naive back in those days, and I didn't really like telling people who I worked for because I would have to go through the same explanation of what a pallet was. And that wasn't something that necessarily interested me. But you know what? I was young and naive. And actually, CHEP are a global multinational multi-billion pound organization, not very well known. And I decided I wanted something a little bit more interesting. And that led me to, well, back probably 20 years ago, jobs were predominantly advertised in the paper. So every Thursday, I used to get the Manchester Evening News and scan the job pages for something a little bit more interesting than working with wooden pallets. And that led me to Greater Manchester Police. So there was a job that came up for a criminal intelligence analyst. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I'll see if I can go for that. So I went for that. Obviously, I was successful and I worked at Greater Manchester Police for about 5 years. Started off as an intelligence analyst. A couple of years later, moved up to a senior analyst. Ended up working in the Force Intelligence Bureau, which was probably the most interesting job that I'll ever have. Had access to all of the very secret criminal intelligence that GMP collected and received. And then austerity hit. And for some reason in America, they were giving mortgages to ninjas, people with no income, no job and no assets, which was a bit bizarre because I don't know that I could get a mortgage with no income, no job and no assets. And so the threat of redundancy started to rear its head. And I was firmly of the opinion that I will choose where I work. No one else is choosing where I work. And I always remember my principal analyst at the time telling me that multi-force experience was something that was really good to have and something that would help me progress through the kind of promotional ladder. And that led me to British Transport Police. And so I started in British Transport Police, I think it was about 2010, and spent 9 years there as a senior analyst in the Intelligence Bureau. And I was effectively in charge of a relatively large team, about 23 people, looking at all of the intelligence and all of the crime patterns across the entirety of the jurisdiction of British Transport Police. That led me quickly into a management role. And when I was in a management role, that led me much more closely kind of aligned to business analysis. So it transpired that, and I get the sense that this happens in quite a lot of companies, large scale transformation projects in the police didn't necessarily go that well, tended to cost a lot of money, tended not to deliver a great deal. So over time, my role became more and more closely aligned with transformation projects, trying to make them kind of as successful as they could be. And that led me to manage business analysts. It led me into both delivering and coordinating elicitation sessions, requirements gathering, the gap analysis process. And for me, business analysis at the time just felt like common sense. It was absolutely common sense. And I suppose looking back, predominantly because of quite a heavy analytical upbringing and background I've got. So whenever I saw kind of concepts around business analysis in terms of investigation, in terms of requirements elicitation, business impact assessments, et cetera, that made perfect sense. If I was going to enact some change, even before having been kind of formally trained around business analysis, they were kind of the approaches I probably would have taken. And then yet again, austerity and redundancy kind of raised its head. And again, I didn't want to necessarily have someone else choose my career. So I had a pause to reflect. And the reflection piece for me was the thing that really got me out of bed and into work was helping other people, mentoring people. Really, it was taking younger people and giving them the ability to get a house, to get a dog or a pet, to have a child, to do all the things that work kind of provides you with. I got a massive sense of satisfaction with that. And that led me to Firebrand training. So I started with Firebrand training in 2019. So I've been with Firebrand just over 4.5 years now. And I started off as a subject matter expert in data analysis. It's profound background. What is going on there? I don't think that's necessarily directed at me, but I shall carry on. So that led me to Firebrand training as a subject matter expert in business analysis and data analysis. So I was the individual that was supporting apprentices make their way through their apprenticeship programs, be it as a data analyst or a business analyst. I was promoted after a couple of years to head of curriculum. So then I got the chance to completely design the program. So when I take you through a little bit of how we upskill our business analysts in terms of apprenticeships, I suppose it's probably my design effectively. And that's kind of led me here to you today. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to teach you, inform you a bit about who Firebrand are, potentially our delivery model, how we do things, why we're a little bit different from many of the other training providers that are out there. We'll have a little look about the origin of business analysis. So I know that we've probably got some people in the room that are pretty well versed in terms of BA, and maybe some people that aren't that well versed in BA. So I think it's quite cool to look at the origins of business analysis. And actually, when you start to look at where business analysis has come from over time, it's actually really interesting. And you might be surprised that in some senses, large automotive organizations have driven kind of business analysis forward in terms of transformation. So we'll have a little look at the origins of business analysis. I must kind of qualify, it is just one view of the origins of business analysis. I don't think there's one, it's not etched in stone exactly how business analysis has developed over time. So it's just one view of how BA has developed over time. We'll have a little look at business analysis competencies. So what would you expect a BA to be able to do? Their types of knowledge and experience. We'll look specifically, I suppose, in my key area, which is apprenticeships. And one of the most interesting parts for me, particularly having worked in business in an industry for kind of 22 years, is how apprenticeships are funded as well. And it's really interesting how apprenticeships are funded, predominantly because the student pays absolutely nothing, yet they get thousands and thousands of pounds worth of training. So we'll have a little look at that. We'll have a little look at business analysis certifications that the BCS deliver, and Firebrand use the BCS, so we incorporate BCS certifications within our apprenticeship training as well. So we'll take a little bit of a look at that. And then hopefully I'll probably have time for a little bit of a Q&A as well. So Firebrand are 20 years old last year. We were created by a couple of individuals that had gone to America on an IT training course. And they discovered that actually a more of an intensive approach to training, maybe residential block training, was more of an effective way of training individuals. And their idea was, if we can take as many distractions away from the learner as possible, we can deliver training in a much shorter period of time than our competitors can. And we've been pretty successful in that. So that was, I suppose, Firebrand in terms of a commercial sense. So for instance, you would pay, I don't know, thousands of pounds to come and train at Firebrand for 5 days. Potentially, maybe you needed a cybersecurity certification in order to perform your role. So you would come to Firebrand, you'd live with us effectively. Our training facility is in Boston in Bedfordshire. It has a hotel right next to it. So you come and stay with Firebrand effectively, and you roll out of your hotel bedroom, get some breakfast, and actually quite a nice breakfast. We've got really good hash browns. And then you roll straight into our training center. And the idea being, like I said, distraction-free training. So hopefully you haven't got all the issues of adulting in terms of childcare and all those other things. You really are just there to learn. And I always say to people about Firebrand, you'll make a friend for life, because you probably got 15 or 16 people in exactly the same circumstance. They're all staying away from home. They're all there to learn some fairly technical and fairly complex kind of training. And you end up making a friend for life, which is, I suppose, an added benefit in terms of that training. Not only will you get certified quicker than you would elsewhere, you're probably going to make a friend for life, which is no bad thing. So Firebrand apprenticeships started in about 2017, and I won't bore you with the background in and around apprenticeships, but they've got a couple of key metrics here. So we trained over 1,300 apprentices since 2015, and we've got the highest distinction rate in the country. You won't find a digital training provider that gets kind of more distinctions in apprenticeships than Firebrand do, not with the help of BCS, but BCS are one of the main assessment organizations that our apprentices go through, and that isn't necessarily a Firebrand choice. The endpoint assessment organization is an employer-led choice, but we get more distinctions than anyone else. We've got a 74% quality achievement rate, and that might not make, and I am a data analyst, that number in isolation might not make a huge amount of sense. But when I tell you that's the best in the country, it starts to make a little bit more sense. So no one puts apprentices through apprenticeships, be they business analysis, data analysis, software developer, cybersecurity technician, infrastructure, networking. Nobody gets apprentices through those programs successfully than Firebrand does. 96% of the people that start with us go on to complete. We've got over 1,500 courses in our training portfolio. 98% of attendance on all of our standards as well. So I suppose when you pay necessarily a premium to come on a training course, you pretty much guarantee to get a high attendance. We do come under the Ofsted inspection framework. So we were inspected in 2019 and we came out with a good grade with outstanding features. And we're actually quite eager to get Ofsted back in because we think we've got a very good shot at getting a grade 1. And we've saved 1 million training days through our accelerated delivery model. And Firebrand courses, because you stay with us and it's a residential block delivery, we tend to have slightly more intense days, which means we can get through those training courses to the same level as others do, but in a much shorter period of time. And we've ended up giving, well, not we haven't given, but we've ended up supporting people gaining over 125,000 certifications. And that's what kind of Firebrand specialize in. We specialize in getting you vendor certifications from the likes of CompTIA, from the likes of the BCS, from the likes of Dell EMC. We love to get people certifications. We've got one of the only Pearson VUE testing facilities in the country, based at Boston as well. So you come and stay with us, you roll into the training center. Once you've completed your course, you literally walk next door into a fully proctored and invigilated, very, I suppose, secure testing center. So not only will you come and train with us, you can also get your badge as well. And that is one of the things that we're really, really proud of. And a little bit about how we do our thing. So we do block delivery. So you would probably come and stay with us for 4 or 5 days, depending on the nature of the course. We have a state-of-the-art residential training facility. And like I say, we train in software development, we train in cybersecurity and data analytics and business analysis. And that tends to require you to have a relatively modern and technologically advanced kind of training facility. That distraction-free element really allows learners to immerse themselves in their studies. And we obviously, because you've seen from those statistics, that generates really, really good results. We don't just do block delivery. Clearly, the pandemic threw a little bit of a spanner in the works when no one was allowed to go out or interact with each other, other than you were a Tory party member going to one of their Christmas parties, in which case apparently you were allowed to interact with each other. But we followed the rules, and we prided ourselves before the pandemic on just delivering residential training. We didn't do online training whatsoever, but the pandemic threw a significant spanner in those works. And so we had to, I think within 2 weeks from lockdown, we created our online and our hybrid learning as well. And I'll take you through a little bit about what that hybrid piece looks like in a second. And the way that we kind of, regardless of whether you're training for be a BA or a cybersecurity technician, we follow the same kind of methodology, which is lecture, lab, and review. So in the mornings, we tend to do a lot of the theory and the conceptual pieces. We recognize that maybe after 4 or 5 hours worth of relatively intense, complex technical training, people's brains might be a little less more effective or productive than they were in the morning. So when we get towards the afternoon, we have lab environments. So depending on the nature of the course, will largely dictate the nature of the lab environment, but that's where we actually get the students and the apprentices to practice what they're actually doing. So those concepts they've learned in the morning, they'll actually reinforce those concepts through practical learning through our lab process. And then when their brains are really starting to turn down, then we start to move into the review phase. So we'll start to cover off towards the afternoon and early evening. We'll start to look at the reflection piece, because there's a lot of educational research that suggests that if you can reflect on your learning, if you can reflect at any stage in life, that is a really good thing. And it's really difficult to reflect in industry. I kind of came up with an analogy, whether it's my own or whether I kind of assimilated it through osmosis. Working in industry is like being in a very fast flowing river, and you never get the chance to sit on the bank and look at the river and go, oh God, that's flowing quickly. So that reflection piece is really important to us. And we pride ourselves in teaching to mastery. And that's through work-based learning, residential learning, or online learning. And our classrooms will look a little bit like this. So whether we're doing a residential training, whether we're doing online training or hybrid training, we tend to have the same kind of makeup. So we'll have a live instructor with a camera on there. We have a camera on policy for students as well. So you can't come into our training classes without a camera on, because if you haven't got your camera on, the trainer can't see whether you're assimilating what they're teaching you, and they can't diversify their learning style to meet your needs. So we have a strict camera on policy. We have online exam preparation sessions, lots of online tools to ask and answer questions as well. Clearly, we are obviously using the chat functionality of Zoom and Teams or WebEx or whatever system we're using at the time. We've got classroom audio, including on-site questions from students, and online technical support as well. And the image in the top right, and I'll see if I can bring my laser pen up. Always love a laser pen. You can see the top right, this is our hybrid delivery model. So you can see the trainer there in the lovely blue suit. You've got a collection of students who are physically there in the training center. And then we've got a huge bank of screens right at the back. And that's where our online students can kind of log in from. So that virtual and hybrid classroom got all the benefits of classroom study, but without the hassle and the cost, because we appreciate not people may live really far away from Bedfordshire, might not be able to, for whatever reason, maybe family reasons, get into our training facility. And the pandemic really did force us to diversify how we delivered our training courses. So let's have a little look about why business analysis. Well, the World Economic Forum is a relatively robust and trustworthy organization. And the World Economic Forum, I skipped on one too far there. You can see right at the top, and probably absolutely no surprise, artificial intelligence and machine learning right at the top of the pops in terms of the future of jobs and growth in jobs over the next kind of 10 and 15 years. But we do have, coming in at number 10, digital transformation specialists, which I suppose is probably a posh way of saying business analysis. Whenever you see the word transformation, I always think of change. So reality is BAs are in demand. They are in demand, and they're always going to be in demand. And one of the simple reasons is, a bit like seasons, businesses are always changing, and the businesses that don't change tend not to be around for that long. And that's, I suppose, one of the overriding things I've taken away from kind of 22 years worth of industry is businesses are always changing, just like the seasons. So where has business analysis come from? I suppose you can track the need to analyze things and to make improvements. You probably track that to the dawn of humanity. Although the general consensus in terms of the birth of the BA or business analysis starts with General Electric. And so in the 1970s, General Electric and Six Sigma started off the approach. And General Electric, they recognized the need for systematic approaches to improve business processes. And they implemented what is called the Six Sigma process. And I will not go into a huge amount of depth around Six Sigma, but there's something called the empirical rule, which effectively says if your data points are 3 standard deviations away from the mean, you can accept those as outliers, and that might be something you want to deep dive, or maybe that's something you can do some deeper analysis on to see whether that can be improved and to move it less than 3 sigmas away from the mean. And so that you can very much think of that as a data-driven decision-making and process improvement process. And it became widely recognized approach in various industries, and there are dedicated training courses around Six Sigma now, Lean Six Sigma, lots and lots of training courses. And in fact, Firebrand deliver a lot of training courses around Six Sigma as well. In the 1980s, IBM and structured system analysis and design methods came to being. So then in the 1980s, IBM played a significant role in business analysis with the development of structured systems analysis and design methods. And that provided a structured approach to business and system analysis, ensuring clarity and effectiveness in understanding requirements and how to move things forward. It moved on, and I am a bit of a car fanatic. So rather than having the Toyota emblem, I decided to have what I think is the GR Supra, which is a GT3 car. It's a very, very cool car. But in the 1990s, Toyota started to lead the way, and they implemented the Toyota production system. And that demonstrated the practical application of BA principles. And the Toyota production system emphasized continuous improvement, waste reduction, and standardized processes. And that became a benchmark for operational efficiency across the automotive industry and beyond. In the 2000s, we started to see a little bit of a diversification in terms of methodologies, and the term Agile started to come into being. And we witnessed the rise of Agile methodologies. And I always coin Agile, and lots of people have different opinions on where Agile came from and how it came to be. But my kind of approach is particularly around software development. You might get a software developer that could quite happily, and apologies, there are only software developers in the room, and this is not a generalization. Some software developers would quite happily sit in a darkened room, have one meeting with a customer right at the outset of maybe a bit of a project that they're working on, and then maybe 18 months later, they would deliver something. And in industry, too often, after 18 months, the customer looked at the product the software developer developed and asked them, well, this isn't what I wanted. And how often can business and business leaders stomach investing large amounts of money, effort, time, and resource, and not necessarily delivering what they wanted? So that gave birth to the Agile methodologies. Again, I won't go into huge amounts of detail, but it's really simple and it makes perfect sense. Agile is you divide your project up into sprints, and at the end of every sprint, you speak to the customer. So you basically, rather than gathering the requirements right at the beginning and then spending a year making it, you gather requirements at the beginning, you make a little bit and you show it to the customer. And at that stage, the customer can kind of come on. And yeah, you could be right, Scrum and Agile could have been used since 1994. And I did say this was just one view of the history. So don't hold me to account too hard on the history. Like I said, it's not etched in stone. But I think Amazon were one of the larger companies that started with the process. We had Agile approaches such as Scrum and Kanban that fostered more collaborative, more flexible, and more of an iterative approach. And BAs obviously played a crucial role in facilitating and communicating and listing requirements, constantly ensuring that business value in Agile products was delivered. Or I think I might have skipped actually one image, so I apologize for that. Now I'm on to Amazon in 2010. And Amazon decided, probably very smartly, that data-driven decision-making was the way forward, and it emerged as a leading example of leveraging data-driven decision-making. And through their customer-centric approach and extensive analytics, Amazon were able to use business analysis techniques like no other organization had at the time to drive personalization, to improve customer experience and optimize supply chain operations. And that shows an example about organizations across different decades recognized the importance of business analysis and applied it to achieve significant outcomes. While specific organizations stood out as leaders in each decade, it is important to note that the adoption of business analysis principles and methodologies extended beyond these examples, shaping the evolution of the discipline across the industry. Standardization and professionalization was obviously a really important thing. And in recent years, the standardization of the business analysis practice has gained momentum. Organizations across various sectors, including banking, manufacturing, and e-commerce, have implemented industry-recognized frameworks, such as the BABOK, the Business Analysis Body of Knowledge, and that ensures consistent and effective business analysis processes. The BCS offer the International Program in Business Analysis across a wide range of the SFIA levels, which shows the maturity of the role and the concept. You tend not to necessarily get lots and lots of training courses and lots of abilities to be certified until that role reaches a certain level of maturity in the market. Today, business analysis clearly plays a crucial role in shaping strategic decisions within organizations. And I think that a data-driven decision-making will go hand in hand with that. And we're starting to see business analysis syllabuses probably more cognizant of data analytics, which I think is definitely a good thing. And in industries such as technology and consumer goods, business analysts leverage market research, competitive analysis, customer insights, and that identifies growth opportunities, drives product innovation, and it helps make informed business decisions. So why would you employ a business analyst? Probably heard a little bit of the justification so far, but it's to understand the structure and the dynamics of an organization in which a system is to be deployed. If you don't understand your business domain and your business environment, the chances of you implementing successful change are pretty low. They're there to understand current problems in a target organization and identify improvement potentials. And I suppose reflecting on my own experience, maybe you could get a lot of myths and assumptions which would have sometimes driven business analysis, particularly kind of 20 years ago, whereas actually it's a bit more data-led now. It ensures that the customer and the end user and developers have a common understanding of the target organization as well. Everybody needs to understand clearly the end goal. And most organizations are continually changing. Therefore, the need for business analysis is long term. So if you're someone that's maybe starting out in their career and trying to understand where you might want to go, organizations are always changing. Ergo, they will probably always have a need for a business analyst in some guise or. And people can describe BA across 6 areas. BA planning and monitoring, so that's the task that BA performs to organize and coordinates the efforts of their colleagues and stakeholders and produce outputs and use key inputs to the guidelines of other areas. Elicitation and collaboration, so business analysts may not have the kind of subject matter expertise in a specific area, so they'll actually have to go and elicit information from stakeholders. And collaboration is obviously super important as well. And elicitation might seem like a relatively simple thing to do, but there's actually almost an entire industry around the right ways to elicit information and the wrong ways to elicit information. And once you've elicited it, what do? Do you do everything the customer says? Should you prioritize it? Maybe the customer says something that isn't in line with your strategic objectives. So the BA plays a crucial role in ensuring those requirements not only are coming from customers, but they're also in line with strategic kind of business decisions as well. And that leads to the requirement lifecycle in terms of gathering those requirements, managing those requirements through. The reality of life isn't that you gather a requirement and that requirement stays completely static throughout the entire life cycle of a project. Requirements often change, so you need to have a mechanism and a process in order to gather those requirements at the outset and manage those requirements as they may change and evolve as you go through the product and the solution lifecycle. Strategy analysis as well, that describes the work that BAs do, that they need to collaborate with stakeholders to identify those strategic needs or those tactical needs, because quite often those needs can be significantly different and require a significantly different approach in order to be able to deliver. Requirements analysis, design and definition, that describes a task that BAs perform to structure and organize requirements during elicitation activities. And solution evaluation, so once you understand fundamentally what your customers want and require, then you can start to move on to the solution stage and start to get a little bit creative in terms of how you might want to approach meeting all of those requirements. There are obviously good characteristics of a business analyst, sorry, analytical skills right at the top there, which I suppose why when I started to get involved in business analysis, it just seemed like common sense. I didn't need to be taught about the gap analysis process. It made utter common sense to establish where we were now, where we wanted to be in the future, and then we could work out how we would get there through those gaps. BAs quite often need leadership skills, probably more advanced communication skills that you'll see necessary in other roles. If I compare data analytics to business analytics, BAs are actually taking their stakeholders and maybe putting them on a diagram in terms of their power and influence or power and interest. And that will allow the BA to understand what level of information they should give to whom, and maybe the level of detail they want to give, and maybe the frequency they want to pass information over as well. But they'll often need to maybe direct team members. There may be a bit of forecasting or budgetary responsibility as well. So there are some inherent leadership skills kind of built in there as well. Business process and planning is another really important facet of it. A picture can say 1,000 words, which is why I suppose business process modeling is in there as well. So planning a project scope, understanding the requirements of the project, identifying the resources. Maybe the project is taking an existing process and looking for some improvements in it. And technical skills as well, particularly in the IT sector. BAs need to be fairly comfortable with the benefits that IT can bring, particularly when they're talking about solutions and maybe implementing them as well. Maybe hardware capabilities, maybe the concepts of databases, big data, real-time data, parallel processing of data. They need to have a roundabout understanding of some of those fundamentals of technology in order to be able to advise and guide in terms of the best types of solutions that could be out there. There are quite a few business analysis qualifications and quite a lot that the BCS deliver as well. And these qualifications are wrapped around what is called the SFIA framework. And again, it's a little bit, if you've ever come across Bloom's taxonomy, if you've done a degree, you'll probably understand that maybe in the lower levels, maybe at an A level or the first year of a degree, you'll be required to maybe identify concepts and identify situations. When you start to move up through those university levels, particularly at levels 6 and 7, you're starting to get into the creation phase. So it's not good enough just to identify something. You've got to identify something and create something off the back of it. And so what you'll find in the terms of the BCS certifications is they're wrapped around levels as well. So the levels that we're going to look at in a little bit of detail are from levels 3 to 7, and you can kind of think of those as apply, foundation level, enable, a practitioner level, ensure and advise, a professional level, initiate and influence, there's that creation piece in terms of a consultant level, and then we get to level 7, setting strategy, inspiring people, mobilizing as well, which tend to be really high order competencies because they're really quite difficult to do. So it turns out there's quite a few different business analysis qualifications. Sensible place to start would be the foundation area. And so for people that are looking to get started in business analysis, there are foundational level certificates that the BCS run. These are at the SFIA level 3. So there's a foundation certificate in BA, a foundation certificate in business change, in organizational behavior, and an IS project management as well. And IS is information systems, so very much on the kind of technological side, but I suppose accepting that not all business analysis is technology based. Most of it will be, but I'm sure there'll be, I'm sure a farmer that wants to improve how they farm their land, maybe that might not be hugely technological, but these days with GPS and artificial intelligence and autonomous vehicles, maybe it is. Then we move on to the practitioner level. We've got a little bit of a larger suite of qualifications here. So practitioner certificate in business analysis practice, benefits management and business analysis, modeling business processes, data management essentials becoming more and more important. And I think the third job in terms of the highest growing jobs in the World Economic Forum was business intelligence analyst. And I suppose that's where I started my career. Requirements engineering, and then a full fat diploma in business analysis as well. And actually, these are the ones that are built into our Firebrand courses. So I'll deep dive a little bit deeper into the nature of those courses as we go through. Then we move to the professional levels. We've got professional certificate in advanced requirement gathering, in agile business processes, in benefit planning and realization. And if there is an amusing part to business analysis, for me, it's benefits realization. And I can remember before I properly got into business analysis, in the organization I worked in, we basically changed the main system, the main computer system we were using. And I got called to London for a benefits realization meeting, and I didn't really have any idea what it was. And the lead BA at the time turned around to me and said, Sean, when we changed this system, we told the CEO that we would save 500,000 hours of people time. Where are your 500,000 hours, Sean? And my response to him, and it's partly why I got into business analysis, is I haven't saved 500,000 hours. It's cost me 500,000 hours. It's not the other way around. And I suppose there's a bit of a moral thing. That's why I got interested in business analytics, because I had no understanding of how someone could be so far away in terms of what a benefit of a transformation program would bring. We've got business architecture as well, business finance, data analytics within business analysis as well, stakeholder engagement, an incredibly complex area, especially when you want to get it right. Team leadership, so maybe as you go into a senior or a lead BA and you've got a team of BAs, there's an inherent facet around leadership as well. And then we move into the consultant level. And where we have the advanced international diploma in business analysis. And actually the Firebrand course, we have the international diploma in business analysis. It's not the advanced version. It's not suitable for the level that we're kind of training at. But certainly we offer this course within Firebrand as well. Then we have the expert level where we can get an expert kind of award in BA. So not taking you through a huge amount of depth in terms of the minutiae of those courses and the syllabuses, for instance, but I think you can probably see that there are a significant number of levels that will take you from kind of a beginner right the way through to an expert, incredibly well supported around certifications. And I know from experience that those certifications all come with syllabuses, they all come necessarily with materials that are really there to support you to kind of push your way through push your way through the business analysis piece. So I want to talk to you specifically about modern apprenticeships in the UK. And I suppose probably a little bit of a soapbox moment for me. I don't perceive that the government, or any governments, they don't tend to have that many good ideas. They tend to spend a lot of my money, and inflationary pressures come kind of as a result of it. But they do have some good ideas. And maybe the apprenticeship levy is one of their really, really good ideas. And the apprenticeship levy is, in fact, a really, really good idea. So any employer in the UK with a wage bill of more than £3 million a year, 0.5% of their entire wage bill is taxed off them. And that tax is effectively put into an apprenticeship pot that only that employer can access. And if they don't access those funds within 2 years, they go back to the Treasury. Employers with a wage bill below £3 million, they'll only pay 5% of the apprenticeship funding bands. And for business analysis, the business analysis funding band for an apprenticeship in business analysis is £18,000. So if you were to do an apprenticeship in business analysis, effectively, you would be having £18,000 spent on you. And I challenge any of you in the room, and maybe this is the worst idea going, to work out how much money you've had invested in yourselves in terms of training. And I did this quick calculation this morning. I've had £12,000 invested in me, roughly, and I suppose plus or minus probably 10 or 15%, £12,000 invested in me in 22 years. This is £18,000 invested over 18 months, which is a really, really good thing. It may well have had profound implications for normal organizations' training budgets. They're having all this tax forcibly taken off them and put into an apprenticeship pot. Probably naturally, they're going to reduce their training pots. But the really good thing is that this apprenticeship levy recognises small and medium enterprises as well. So for employers with a wage bill of below £3 million a year, they'll only pay 5% of that £18,000, and the government will fund 95% of it as well, which I think is a really good thing. In addition to that, employers that are relatively small and employ less than 50 people, and with apprentices between 16 and 18, the government will fund the entire thing. So they'll fund that entirety of that £18,000. And so my analytical brain naturally thinks, well, I wonder how much money an average organisation in the UK is putting into this apprenticeship pot every year. Well, it just so happens I've done a few rudimentary calculations, and I've taken kind of 3 sizes of employers. So a very large employer in the UK, you'll probably find to actually tie down how try working, if you've got an organization of over 300,000 people, just working out how many people work for you at any one time, that's probably near impossible. So there are some organizations in the UK, very large employers between 300 and 350,000 employees. So taking an organization with 350,000 employees with an average wage of £30,000, and don't shoot me for this, I have plucked that number out. The average wage is probably about 28 grand, but I suppose that will depend on what kind of organization you're working for. Your estimated wage bill is £10.5 billion, and that organization will be pumping in £52 million a year into their apprenticeship pot, which is a colossal amount of money. That will fund a lot of business analysts, I think you find. But not all organizations in the UK employ 350,000 people, clearly. It's probably, I don't know, maybe 10, if that. A large employer in the UK, so most of the organisations I've worked for up until Firebrand probably had around about 3,000 people in. Probably a bit of the attraction of Firebrand was I wanted to experience what it was like to work for a smaller company. If you've got 3,000 people, you've got an estimated wage bill of 90 million quid a year, so you're putting 450 grand every single year into that apprenticeship pot. And if you're a medium-sized employer, apparently that is employees of 250 and less, probably putting about just over £37,000 into that apprenticeship pot. That is every single year. And if you don't spend that after 2 years, it vanishes. It literally vanishes. So there's an entire industry in apprenticeships, particularly on large employers, in terms of transferring their levy to different companies. So you might get the likes of Microsoft, who've got maybe 100,000 employees in the UK. They probably may not physically be able to spend all that money. But what they have is a corporate social responsibility. So they can transfer some of their levy funds to some of maybe their partner organizations. Their partner organizations can start to use that money as well. So probably one of the most interesting questions is if you do work for a business, how utilized is your apprenticeship levy? How much money are you leaking out as a business out of your apprenticeship pot that is just vanishing, that could be used to invest not just for a business analyst, but for a cybersecurity technician, for an abattoir worker? We'll see in a second how many apprenticeships there are, but how utilized is it and where is it being utilized? The more knowledge you have in terms of how much money roughly your organization is putting into this apprenticeship pot and how it's been utilized, maybe the more leverage you have for getting a successful apprentice in your team, or maybe becoming an apprentice yourself. One of the cool things about apprenticeships is, well, not only the way that it's funded, which I think is a very cool thing, it's effectively self-funded. It also funds small and medium enterprises, and it also funds completely for free relatively small organizations with younger apprentices as well. There's an organization that kind of administers, for want of a better term, the apprenticeships, and that's called the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. And they have on their website 832 apprenticeships. You can actually be a doctor. You're going to be an apprentice doctor. I'm not sure that the endpoint assessment will involve you practicing removing a liver or something along those lines. But you can be an apprentice police officer, an apprentice doctor, an apprentice solicitor. And in fact, I think there might be more apprentice solicitors now than there are solicitors going through other forms of kind of upskilling in terms of that qualification. So there's lots and lots of apprenticeships around in the country, which I think is a really good thing, particularly the way that they're funded. And this is the business analysis apprenticeship. So I'll take you through a couple of the key points here. Level 4, and for those that don't know, level 2 equivalent to a GCSE, level 3 is equivalent to an A level, level 4 is equivalent to a first year of a degree, level 5 second year of a degree, level 6 full degree, level 7 masters, level 8 doctorate. So the level 4 business analysis apprenticeship is pitched at a relatively high level. That's the first year of a university degree. But the benefit of it is you're not coming out with £100,000 worth of debt. Yes, you might not have had as much fun as you would have in the first year of universities living in halls, but you do tend, in particularly modern times, to pay a pretty penny for that. There you can see the maximum funding band. So there's those £18,000 that's already kind of self-funded, that your employers are potentially probably already paid, probably are leaking that money and more money out of their organization as well. But maybe one of the other cool things is how they're developed. So they're not developed by government. They're not developed by the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. They're not developed by organizations like Firebrand, not developed by universities, not developed by colleges. They're developed by big ticket organizations in the UK. So they're called trailblazer groups. And they're collections of organizations that come together to define what a business analyst should do collectively. And on each apprenticeship, you'll see exactly what organizations have come together to develop it. So you can, I suppose, they're the ones to cheer or the ones to blame. But Allianz, Bupa, the NHS, Zurich, Barclaycard, the National Grid, the DWP, the Co-op Bank, Yorkshire Water, big ticket organizations in the UK have come together to define what a BA should know, what a BA should be able to do, and how a BA should behave whilst doing that as well. So I coin it as the Business Analysis Apprenticeship Standard is UK organizational view on what a business analyst should do. And when you compare that to university, you're much closer to industry. No matter how much universities say they're close to industry, they're not as close to industry as industry is. And this is an industry-led certification, an industry-led qualification. So those industries have created this business analysis standard, which I think is a really, really good thing. There are some eligibility constraints. What tends to happen, and I don't think I'll necessarily be the first person, this won't be a moment of complete clarity for you, but when the government tax money, when you want to access that money, there's quite a lot of hoops to jump through. So apprentices need to have the right to the work in the UK. More importantly, the apprentice needs to be in the role that demonstrates the skills that a business analysis requires. So part of the BA standard is to develop a benefits realization plan. So if you've got a business analyst, but for whatever reason they don't touch benefits realization, without that skill, they're not going to be able to complete the apprenticeship. And that's where I suppose I come in and my colleagues come in to make sure that employers are fully sighted on exactly what a business analyst has to do, because if they don't do it all, they can't complete and they can't get the qualification. And obviously we're in the business of getting people qualifications, which is why we have 96% kind of achievement rate, 76% quality achievement rate as well. Educational criteria tend to vary from provider to provider. I won't name names, but the lower the eligibility criteria you have, generally the higher a volume of apprentices you can get on program. Generally, the more money you can make. What you won't get is you won't get the quality achievement rate that Firebrand have got at 74%. We've got the highest in the country. And one of the reasons that we've got the highest in the country is that we make sure that businesses are fully sighted on what their apprentice has to do, and we'll support them for the full journey. We're not in it to make huge amounts of money. We're in it to change people's lives, but one person at a time. That apprentice must gain new and significant learning as well. So relatively common sense, it's become government money through the Apprenticeship Levy. The government wants to make sure that money is spent as effectively as possible. So if you've gone to university and you've done a business analysis degree, you're not going to get new and significant learning from a business analysis apprenticeships. That money will not be able to spend on you. We are prohibited from doing that. So we'll basically deep dive your entire educational background and your entire work experience to establish whether you will get new and significant learning. But I suppose the term new and the term significant, they can be interpreted in different ways by different people. The other thing about apprenticeships, and something that I suppose apprenticeships wasn't a thing that I considered in my educational upbringing. And I suppose the reason is because there was lots of myths and assumptions, and the digital space around apprenticeships was not as developed as it was now when I was kind of going through the educational levels and stuff. But I suppose if you were to ask me before I worked in apprenticeships what my perception of them would have been, vocational for 16 to 19-year-olds, and they probably would have been my two broad assumptions. And that there's nothing that could be further from the truth. They're open to any age as long as you're allowed to legally work. So I suppose there's a lower age boundary, but there's no upper age boundary. You could be an apprentice at 65. As long as you get new and significant learning, there's absolutely nothing stopping you reskilling. So it's available to any age to upskill, to reskill, or for new skills. There are some constraints with that. So alongside the government wanting that apprenticeship money to be spent as effectively as possible, they also want to make sure that people's English and maths are at the right level so they can kind of progress at a decent pace. So apprentices must have English and maths at a GCSE level, A to C for old money. New money, not super familiar with the new way of the, I don't know why they have to change it, or apparently to diversify from different levels of A stars or something, but 6 and above. So there has to be a certain level of English and maths attainment at a GCSE level for the apprentice. But if they haven't got that A to C or 6 and above, in terms of English and maths, they'll be enrolled on functional skills courses. So the government will fund them to get their English and maths at A to C and 6 and above, which is also a really cool thing as well. Someone else just put a slide and I'm not sure why. So this is what Firebrand do. So in terms of how we deliver our apprenticeship, just go through the animations. Our apprenticeship is made up of 4 courses. It spans 16 months. And you can break those 16 months down into 13 months worth of practical work. So that's coming on courses at Firebrand, developing a portfolio of evidence, preparing for the endpoint assessment phase. And then when it comes to the end of the month 13, we'll hand off our apprentice to an endpoint assessment organization, most likely the BCS, which is probably why I'm here today. And the BCS, as an entirely independent organization, will make a competency judgment in terms of whether that apprentice is competent as a business analyst. And that's a really good thing because that maintains the quality and the integrity of the qualification. So when people do see a BA apprenticeship, maybe you can shortlist for that now, whereas in the past, maybe you weren't able to shortlist as effectively when you're recruiting for new BAs coming into your business. So we have 4 courses. So the first course that we have is the British Computer Society International Program in Business Analytics. It's a globally recognized BA qualification. It's really, really good. It's quite a long qualification, so we split that into 2 training sessions. You might find other training providers will deliver this over 4 weeks. We'll deliver it over 2 weeks. So in part 1, we'll look at the competencies of a BA and a role of the BA, how a BA fits into an organization. We'll start to look at some of the BA evaluation techniques in terms of defining a business situation. So SWOT, VMOS, PESTLE potentially. PESTLE is really good when particularly forcing yourself to consider your external impacts of how you're changing. We'll look at stakeholder analysis. We'll start to look at investigation techniques and the ream of investigation techniques, the strengths and limitations of those. So if you've got to speak to 400 people, you're probably not going to do one-to-one interviews because you'll be doing that until you retire. So you're probably going to go for maybe a survey, a questionnaire, maybe a very big workshop. We'll look at activity modeling, we'll look at business case development, and we'll start to look at business process modeling as well. And the second part of the International Program in Business Analytics, we'll look at the BA's role in project work. We'll look at stakeholder management, which I think is really interesting for me, particularly coming from a data analytics background predominantly. Data analysts, even though we are driven to communicate really effectively with stakeholders, we have to deliver insight and convince stakeholders to maybe recommend pieces of change. What we don't do as data analysts, and we're not taught to do this, we don't define our stakeholders in terms of their power and interest. So there's some really interesting differences between data analysts and business analysts, lots and lots of synergies, but lots of differences as well. And one of the differences is the consideration that BAs go into in terms of stakeholders. We'll look at requirement solicitation and prioritization and analysis, modeling requirements, validating requirements, and data modeling as well, which is something probably one of the trickiest aspects for a modern business analyst, is wrapping their head around database schemas, database normalization, why we record data in relational tables, why non-relational data is recorded in a slightly different way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But actually a really important facet, we don't consider how our data is recorded and stored and accessed and used when we're changing our systems. Maybe our entire capability around performance management completely shuts off. And that's happened to me. I've been part of business transformation and change where it sounded really good, but they hadn't considered any of the data models behind the BA change. So you come into work one day and you run your standard performance report and it doesn't work because a business analyst has changed something somewhere and hasn't considered the data model particularly effectively. The third course, roughly around month 9, 2 days in length, is the BCS IT Service Management and Business Processes course as well. And that has common security legislation, GDPR. Our implementation of GDPR in the UK isn't GDPR, it's the Data Protection Act of 2018. So it's really important to understand those EU-driven principles and regulations and how they're interpreted and implemented into legislation in the UK. Service management practices within organizations, particularly around IT, how those IT requirements can interlink and correlate with business strategies, how IT systems are used for services. We start to explore the facet of Agile and Waterfall in terms of software development, and a little bit around desktop communications as well. And then the final course in roughly month 9, 4 days in length, APMG's Agile Business Analyst. If there's the International Program in Business Analytics, it does have Agile and Waterfall kind of concepts within there, but it probably doesn't deep dive them as much as maybe a modern business analyst might need. So we kind of complement those BCS courses with an APMG course, and that looks at the role of an Agile BA, Agile processes, Agile project management products, the roles and responsibilities in terms of the Agile methodology, the slight differences in terms of an Agile business case and maybe Agile requirement engineering, time boxing, planning, transitioning, etc., etc., etc. So I kind of said right at the beginning that Firebrand prides itself in delivering vendor-led certifications. And so to get the full International Program in Business Analytics, you need to do 5 things: 4 exams, and 1 oral exam. Now, the apprenticeship funding rules doesn't explicitly allow Firebrand to include, it doesn't allow Firebrand to charge for the exams. So what we've done is we've assimilated any of the exam costs with our partners, the BCS. So our apprentices will get the first try each one of those 4 exams. Now, it turns out the oral exam is quite expensive, it's about £400, and that is commercially unviable for Firebrand to kind of fund that as well, and the government won't fund it through the Apprenticeship Levy. So effectively, we'll give the first try for all of those exams for every one of our apprentices should they want to do it. There's absolutely nothing that says they have to. Those exam certifications are purely a cherry on the cake. They do not have to pass those exams in order to be deemed competent by the BCS in terms of the endpoint assessment phase, but we're a vendor-led certification organisation. There is a vendor-led certification, there's a level 3 business processes certification for the IT service management and business process. So not necessarily luck, but with a lot of hard work and diligence, not only would you come out with an apprenticeship, you come out with an international program in business analytics, an A-level equivalent in terms of IT service management and business processes, and a really bespoke APMG Agile BA certification as well, which is really widely regarded in the market. And we do that through that block delivery. So that's where you come to Firebrand. So for those 5 days, you come and stay with us, you live in our hotel, eat in our restaurant, train in our training facility, take the exam in our kind of training center. And that's a rinse and repeat for each one of those kind of block deliveries you can see there. But that isn't the extent of how we train. We also have a platform called Pluralsight. It's actually linked into the BCS membership. So when you become a Firebrand apprentice, you automatically become a BCS member for a period of time at a hugely discounted rate. Tony Pitcher will hate me for not qualifying exactly what that discounted rate is, but it's a hugely discounted rate. And part of that BCS membership package is access to a platform called Pluralsight. Now, we recognize these courses that will train over 10 days, other organizations might train over 20 days. So ergo, they're a little bit more intense. And if you allow me a Formula One analogy, you don't set fast lap times on cold tires. You set fast lap times on warm tires. And effectively, we use Pluralsight to warm our apprentices' tires up. So I've handpicked content from the Pluralsight platform and positioned it before each one of these courses. So when our apprentices are coming onto those courses, they are not coming in cold. They've got a fairly good understanding about what they've got themselves into and what they're going to be learning about. So that means they get the most impact from our courses. On top of that, they'll have a learning mentor. So that'll be an individual that might not be hugely experienced in the business analysis field, but they'll have a really good experience, certainly in the IT sector, and they'll kind of effectively performance manage that business analyst throughout those entire 16 months. So they'll be asking them and getting them to prove, have you done the pre-reading? And if you've done the pre-reading, you should be able to talk to me about this and this and this. They'll make sure that any of the kind of governmental aspects are completed. They'll pastorally look after those individuals as well. So it isn't all about technical learning. Other things happen in life where they'll need kind of advice, guidance, and support around as well. So we've got that learning mentor at Firebrand that will kind of manage that apprentice all the way through from the very beginning to the very end. And then we've got an additional layer, our subject matter expertise layer. So these are individuals like myself that have been in industry, have been here, done that, unfortunately got the t-shirt or the mug or the pen in some circumstances. So there isn't many things that I haven't seen in terms of business analytics. There clearly will be some stuff. I haven't worked for an automotive industry for et cetera, so you can't work across everywhere. And that will be there to give very bespoke sessions as well. So you'll have a learning mentor, you'll get trained by a kind of an accredited trainer, and you'll also have access to a subject matter expert that can take those apprentices, if needed, on a one-to-one session, and for as much time as required, that will help those apprentices evidence what they need to evidence. And one of the trickiest aspects is that they need to build a portfolio of evidence. For instance, they need to prove they've done the gap analysis process on a project at their own work, with their own work business need in a real life project, using their own business's data, their own business's tool. They'll need to prove to the BCS they've done that through screen grabs, through them writing about it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes for some apprentices, that can be really tricky for them to be able to enact. And that's where the subject matter expertise will come in. And we can help them develop their portfolios of evidence. We can talk to their line managers and say, listen, your apprentice has to do benefits realization. Well, we don't do it, Sean. Yeah, it's non-negotiable. We need to have a conversation about how we are going to do it. So we'll help unblock any of those kind of blockers in terms of the business analysis apprenticeship. Lots and lots of materials we provide. So part of our course, not only will we train the apprentices on the International Program in Business Analytics driven by BCS certifications, we'll give them access to the business analysis book that the BCS produced as well by Deborah and James. But I'd be remiss of me not to include the other book that we give as well, which is the Business Analysis Body of Knowledge, the one-stop shop for everything around business analytics, developed by the International Association of Business Analysts. Something really good to have, even if it's just reference material once you've got through the apprenticeship. So in terms of what you might be able to expect your BA apprentice to be able to do as they go through time, After 3 months, they'll understand the roles and the competencies of a BA in terms of investigation, evaluation, activity modeling, stakeholder analysis, how a BA can help the wider business in terms of transformation and business case formulation. After 6 months, they'll have an understanding of the BA work in a project role, how to manage stakeholders, how to gather effective requirements, the importance of data modeling, particularly in modern transformation. After 9 months, understanding of the key legislation that impacts the BA, some of which will be GDPR and DPA, but depending on the sector you work, you'll have specific legislation that might kind of inform there. They'll have a really good understanding of IT service agreements, principles. They'll have a really good understanding of wider organizational strategies in terms of IT, the types of software that can help with those strategies as well. And after 12 months, obviously everything after 3, 6, and 9 months, and in addition, an understanding of the differences of waterfall and agile, the different ways of working, agile processes, the roles and structures that support agile working as well. I'm not sure how long I've spoken for, but it feels like quite a long time. You're probably pleased to know that that is my final slide, and I will see if there are any questions. Maybe, maybe not. Hopefully you can still hear me.
Yeah, we are here.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
I certainly can, definitely.
Excellent. Well, I think thank you very much for that. We'll do some clapping and then we'll answer. I'll go through the questions.
Cool.
Have not had very many questions coming through. I know that as I said at the start, we weren't going to go into challenging some of the basic concepts, but certainly someone has suggested that that, as they say about the founding of Agile and Scrum, that recollections may vary on how old it is.
I did say it wasn't etched in stone.
No, indeed, and we've had other speakers come here who've given their own interpretations of that. But I thought that was great. You covered the whole, recognising all those terms and phrases from the whole breadth of the business analysis, the syllabuses. So anyone looking at, I mean, the slides and the recording will be preserved forever through the medium of the internet. So anyone can go through that. But that gives a very great list of all of the headings that people undertaking the BCS studies will come across. I was certainly very interested in your talking about the your method of or one of your approaches anyway to delivering the training. And certainly, I think the idea of people learning in groups is something that I've certainly found extremely helpful. And the situation I was in, all of the group were from the same organisation, and it acted as a great deal of, it helped bonding in terms of getting to know people, and it meant that within the organisation, we then developed a sort of common vocabulary for the way we studied things and communicated, and so then there was a standardisation of that. I'm interested also to hear then that you've got a sort of hybrid approach as well to give people the option.
Well, yeah, and I think that the hotel at Boston also has a bar as well, and that can often foster a little bit of collaboration. It is quite expensive though, so I suppose it's tempered collaboration. And you're right, Stephen, it often is of a huge benefit, and a lot of organisations ask us kind of how can we close the cohort, and I often recommend that they don't, because I think you can get even more out of understanding how BAs work in different organisations as well. But then that's probably just my own personal opinion.
Yes, and we would say that attending events such as this, I mean, it's difficult for the people who are not here, but for the people who are here, we have the opportunity to do a bit of networking and talking and sharing our experiences. To which end I would encourage anyone here and elsewhere to contemplate BCS membership and to look into your local branches and your local groups. And I suppose I should also add that there is the option of the BCS website does, or BCS does offer self-study for people who are either struck by financial concerns, and you can just do the exam, but then you essentially have to get the books and write your own course, and it will certainly take a lot longer, but it's an alternative, and you need to be, and I suppose that the advantage of being a group is that you've got someone that to some extent who sort of moans at you if you don't keep up the pace. I mean, that's why people get together. It helps help and encouragement, and if you haven't got that, then you have to have that that challenge.
We've had a few questions on the chat, mainly about clarifications. Could we go back to slide number 9 for a moment?
Oh, we'll attempt to.
Yeah, Bramer said that the third bullet point there possibly conflicts with user researchers in the current environment. Bramer, would you like to expand on that? You can unmute yourself.
Is Bramer there?
Oh, we got a new
She's still
message.
online, but
Yes.
Yeah. Speak.
Could you just repeat your question, please? To do with slide 9, the third bullet point.
She's unmuted herself, but I can't hear anything. Perhaps while she sorts out your audio, we can move on to another question. There's a question from Kitty Hung in the chat. She writes, "Hi Sean, with the emergence of generative AI such as ChatGPT, Google's Bard, DALL-E and Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, I haven't heard of those two. These tools have the capability of understanding human natural language, and then they generate computer code, documentation, diagrams, images, sound, music, motion pictures even. How do you think business analysts need to change the way they work? And if so, what kind of new skills would business analysts have to acquire?"
Well, it's a really interesting question. There is an entire burgeoning industry called prompt engineers, which are effectively people that know their way around tools such as ChatGPT. But this is a very, I could go on for absolutely hours on this topic, but I suppose it's probably going to come down to the ability to be able to validate. So everyone is going to be using a chatbot, everybody. And if you're not, you're probably not going to be growing necessarily as quickly as you want to. But that's not to say that everything that chatbot gives you is actually accurate and true. I can ask ChatGPT to give me the top 10 books of business analysis with links to the Amazon the Amazon places on the Amazon website. If you click on those links, they're completely false. They're a hallucination. They don't, the authors don't exist, the books don't exist, the links don't work. So well, I know how ChatGPT has come up with that, effectively very, very advanced statistics. So maybe the BA role will need to move into more of a validation piece. I certainly think anytime if you're writing natural language and maybe paragraphs of relatively complex material, ChatGPT is going to come into its own. And I think probably everyone could recognize what I'm about to say in terms of when I'm writing something that I deem as probably pretty complicated, it'll probably take me 10 iterations to get to a position that I'm comfortable with that thing that I've written. And what ChatGPT can do is effectively remove 6 or 7 of those iterations. So I certainly am not just taking everything ChatGPT says as carte blanche and believing it. I'm putting a lot of validation into that and parallel sourcing its information. And actually, because you can communicate in natural language with it, you can get it to, well, okay, give me the source of everything that you kind of said. And it will do that and give me the links to those things as well. So I can actually go and validate whether what it's actually saying is entirely correct. I think maybe I haven't seen, I know ChatGPT can create images, it can create software code. Have I seen it been able to take a business process diagram and identify where an improvement could be made and suggest how that improvement could be made? I've not quite seen it have that level of capability yet. Not to say that it potentially won't have that capability, because everything that happens in a human brain largely, in some senses very complexly, can be replicated through an AI model. That's what AI is, it's artificial intelligence. So I think that validation point is really important. I think the use of AI chatbots and large language models will pervade industry so much that actually over time, industry will turn back to that human element, that human sentiment, because what an AI language model won't give you that creativity that we all strive. And the creativity can often lead to the best solutions, the largest amount of growth. And my real fear is everything that these chatbots are based on training data. Training data is utterly, utterly key. What these chatbots do not have access to is all the internal information that BCS record, all the internal information Firebrand record, all the internal information that's recorded in industry. It's not in ChatGPT because it hasn't got access to it. So it is limited. I think there'll be a massive change in terms of, for instance, ChatGPT has learned a lot of Wikipedia. Are Wikipedia going to want to facilitate OpenAI making billions, if not trillions of pounds off their data? I can't see that happening. So I think over time, the access to training data will minimize. I think that most organizations over time will have their own implementation of a large language model, taking that ChatGPT sentiment and augmenting it with their own business data. And I don't think we should be fearful of it. People were talking, I often talk about this type of aspect in AI. And I always go back to the artisan cotton makers. And the artisan cotton makers were up in arms when the Industrial Revolution happened and the ability to use machines to make cotton. And everyone thought that those artisan cotton makers would be out of work. And nothing could be further from the case. Actually, the demand for cotton went through the roof, and more people were employed in the industry. So I think it will help people become more productive. Our BAs will be able to do more projects, maybe more diverse projects over a shorter period of time. They will become more productive with these chatbots. I think there's still that piece in terms of validation, but actually whether you were researching on Google or researching in ChatGPT, if you weren't validating and parallel sourcing, you were always carrying a risk. And actually that risk probably isn't any different. There's still that requirement to kind of validate that information. But BAs, particularly when writing business cases, they're probably one of the roles in industry that's more aligned to large language. So actually, they're probably going to have more of a benefit in terms of using these models. But I don't think we should be fearful. I think it will generate more work and will become more productive as a result. That I hope anyway. Who wants to be made redundant?
But
I've got two questions. If we could, yes. Bramar's said Cart hasn't got access to a microphone, but has put a question in words. Says user researchers currently do the engagement with end users in agile development environments. How do we handle this overlap of responsibility with user researchers? Is it not the case, or is it the case that business analysts, or who is it who will talk to the stakeholders and the end users?
I think, I think my experience is it's different in every single organization. Maybe the larger organizations that scale that are more mature, maybe they'll have specific user researchers. And the organizations I've worked in, they haven't existed. They aren't a thing. So the BA predominantly takes that work. But I suppose it boils down to that advanced communication and collaboration aspect of the BA role. There's another stakeholder they have to liaise with, and BAs aren't stupid. If they can see that work being completed to a high level elsewhere, they're not going to duplicate that work. They're going to interact and liaise with those individuals and use their results. I think as long as everyone's got kind of the same view and can get on board with the process of gathering that information, and the difficulty might come when the user research says one thing, but actually through requirements solicitation or investigation, something else is coming out. That might be a difficult thing to overcome. But I think very specific on the organization you work in and how it's structured. More mature organizations will tend to have a more advanced business analysis or transformation function. Ergo, they may well have hived off their kind of investigation and elicitation aspect into a specific separate role. But most businesses that I come into interactions with, large banks, their BAs are doing the investigation, they're doing the requirements solicitation themselves. So I think if whatever suits the organization is probably the short answer, and you might get the feeling, I don't do short answers that well.
Before I haven't actually asked anyone if anyone in the room has a question. So,
can you see me? Hi, Sean.
I can. Hello.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was just wondering, is there any sort of success rates that you have after this apprenticeship, and how soon do people secure roles? So, is there any sort of indication on that on websites or?
So they've already got a role. They can't do a business analysis apprenticeship unless they're in a role. So unless you're with an employer that has put you onto that apprenticeship and is funding it through their levy, you can't do the apprenticeship effectively. So I suppose that's a relatively simple thing to answer. In terms of our success rate, there was a big hiatus in terms of releasing performance information around apprenticeships due to the pandemic. So the latest figures are for 2020 and 2021. our quality achievement rate for business analysis was 60%. But then I suppose there's, depending on the organization, say you work with an organization that has thought, well, we need 50 BAs, and they've recruited 50 BAs, and then for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe they've not turned over as much revenue, they've had to do a big restructure, those BAs are no longer needed. So there is some nuances within that figure, but 60%, given that the average for that QAR is 74%, we're only 14 percentage points away from that. So 60% is still a strong quality achievement rate in terms of business analysis. And yeah, you have to be in a role.
That probably then answers one question here that says, how do we enroll for an apprenticeship? So I think from what you've said, you need to find yourself a job where you're counting pallets, and then start to work out efficiencies in the pallet processing system, and then speak to the fellows in that organisation and say you want to become a business analyst.
The irony was, Stephen, because the CHEP had a monopoly on the markets, there wasn't a massive need to change.
Sure. Sorry.
Yes.
What would you say to a new business analyst who's, you know, just got into this whole area of work? Do you have any sort of, I don't know, tips?
I think, you know, what it's about domain knowledge, and you probably say that about a lot of jobs. I think BA is a cool role because businesses are constantly changing. So if you're looking for job security, that's a really good place to be. It instills your capability to interact with stakeholders. It's a really broad role. There's elements of analytics, there's elements of databases and data, there's elements of actually speaking to people, there's elements of creativity in terms of solution delivery. So if you're looking for pure interest level, I think it's a really good place to be. I think there's elements of research that suggest that the kind of C-suite, the higher echelons of organizations, a lot of those people have been business analysts in the past as well. So if you're looking to get to the kind of higher levels and the higher echelons of business, a BA experience in the past is definitely not a bad thing. But you know what, had you said that to me when I was 19, oh, I don't care, I just want something that's interesting, I don't care about job security. But that's just naivety, and that maybe just was me, to be honest.
Thank you.
Any other? Kitty has noted that there is at least one website that seems to generate something that looks quite good. Looks like quite good in terms of BA outputs. So I think we better keep ourselves alert to make sure that
until the only thing the AI bot learns from is itself, and that's not going to be a good thing. Because if, say, for instance, all the information on the internet is from an AI chatbot, how is the AI chatbot then learning moving forward?
Indeed. Well, I think we've probably run out of questions, or maybe we could just keep on going forever. But I think it's time to close. And well, I think maybe we did a bit of premature clapping. We'll do some more clapping now.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your cheese and wine.
I think we've eaten the cheese and there wasn't any wine.
I'm sure there's a pub not too far away.
There is, but we go for the non-alcoholic because we are.
Dr. Butler's head is our usual water.
We're somewhat pressed for finances, as is everyone. So, well, thank you, Sean. I mean, it's the normal way of things that we offer our speakers a free BCS book as part of as a symbol of our gratitude, and you've chosen quite appropriately from my last question the book on up for the Artificial Intelligence Foundation. So
always good to have a reference point. And thank you very much for the book.
look at what is threatening us and is going to wipe us all out.
Well, just don't give it. Don't let it be in charge of nuclear weapons. It's simple.
They might already be. You never know. So anyway, so thank you, Sean, and thank everyone. Thank our remote participants on the web. I trust that you've had a great evening, as indeed have we all here. I suggest anyone who's here pick up a copy of the BCS leaflet, and I would also say, according to my notes here, as far as our next event is concerned, the next events of the various groups, we have some dates, but we don't have any confirmed speakers yet. So keep a look on the websites, check your mails for. Hopefully you'll all be on the mailing list, but have a look on the BCS website under the various branches and groups. There's an events calendar as well, which will tell you what's on and how you can get a place. But we possibly have some dates of the 5th and 26th of September. It does seem odd that we've got dates without the content. That's the way around it goes.
You're the speaker for 2nd of August.
Oh, we've got one on the 2nd of August.
He'll be Akmal Chowdhury, who's Akmal Chowdhury has spoken to us on numerous occasions on different subjects, and he's now working for an AI company. So this is very important.
Well, that's great. It's great how one thing leads to another, which shows that we're on the ball. We've got all the hot topics all listed. So I think that's it, unless anyone else has any further announcements or.
No. Thank you very much, Sean. That was very interesting. Thank you.
No problem.
So I think on that note, I hope that my friend in the other room can hear me, and perhaps we can say goodbye and thank you very much indeed, Sean. That was great. Thank you.
My pleasure. Have a good evening, everybody.
You all, everyone everywhere.